All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Today is August 25th already. We are closing in on the end of August, and I cannot believe how rapidly this year has gone by. It just blows my mind. But I hope you're ready for it, because the end of the year is going to be here before you know it, for sure. So we'll kick off here. We're going to have, just for those of you who have not joined these meetings before, just a little brief rundown on the layout, on how it works. These are typically internal benchmark meetings. We have opened the last one and opened this one up to anybody who wants to join us. There are so many things happening in our industry right now that are critical to understand, particularly if you are a real estate practitioner selling real estate actively, and if you are a broker, especially, to understand how to coach and train your people, because the world is about to change. Referring specifically to the class action lawsuits and that sort of thing that's going on. We'll get more into that in just a minute, but the program follows this plan. We have a little bit of housekeeping, since it is a quasi-internal meeting for Benchmark. Then we're going to talk about some market stats. We'll do the national stats. We'll do some local stats. We'll kind of give you some reasons on why things are happening the way they are. And then today we're going to talk about understanding buyer agency and how to get paid and make sure you stay legal. The reason we brought this up, because after the last meeting, we had a lot of questions that came in, and a lot of the questions that came in, it was really clear that folks don't understand the basics. So we're going to kind of take a step back and try to help you understand the basics today. So please don't think I'm going to talk down to you. I'm going to try to help you understand the reality versus the myth of how buyer agency works. And there's not many places that are doing that. So we're going to try to provide that for you today. So I'll start off here and say thank you to Momentum Title. Just to remind all the Benchmarkians that they are exclusively for Benchmark. Your first closing is free. Your personal home is free. Your investment properties are 50% off. And there's only one closing fee. If they get both sides of the transaction, they will split that between the two parties. And they have an ongoing $500 credit in their fees for veterans and first responders. So that's a good opportunity to take advantage and say thank you. They also provide us with revenue that helps pay for your free tools. As you know, nothing in this world is free. And the tools that you see on the screen there that we provide to all Benchmarkians are free, and that is helped pay for with a Momentum Title. So your patronage there is definitely appreciated. I want to remind you that everything Benchmark can be found on benchmark-.com. If you're a non-Benchmarkian, you can't get in there. Don't ask me. I'm not going to let you. But it does have a tremendous amount of assets for those that are with Benchmark, and not the least of which is the training and events calendar, which many of you actually use this feature to register for this webinar this morning. It is a good thing to go on there and check that regularly, because we often update it. We'll have pop-up classes. We'll have pop-up meetings. We had a breakfast with the brokers yesterday here in Cool Springs, and we actually played bingo and ate bacon and eggs. And it doesn't get any better than that. I'm just telling you. So you want to pay attention to that calendar. And now also, if you run into something you can't figure out, we have the help feature down there, have the chat bot feature that will help you point you in the right direction of all the places, all the information you're seeking. So you don't have to kind of click into perpetuity. You can actually go there and cut right to the chase. These tiles right in the middle here contain a tremendous amount of content for you folks, not the least of which is the big red B that you see there, and that's the agent resources section. That agent resources section has a lot of information on it. You can see just a few there, the submitting Benchmark exclusives, our recorded classes. This webinar will be on there along with the slide deck that we're utilizing, step-by-step instructions on how to submit your docs to paperless pipeline, for example, even videos on there. So everything you can think of is right there, including a vendor list. So go there, play with it, get to know it, learn to use it. It's going to save you a lot of time. And oh, by the way, it's available 24/7, 365. So that's a good thing. I want to remind you to hold this date. October 12th is the Benchmark Expo. This event is open to everyone. If you're a Benchmark agent, that's great. Bring your friends, bring your agent friends, bring your non-agent friends. We're changing up the format a little bit this year. We're going to have kind of a vendor fair, and they're not all home inspectors, so don't worry. And they're going to have a good high quality vendor fair. Most of these folks are giving away stuff, so you want to be sure and bring a stack of business cards. Sometimes they're even giving away money, so you want to especially bring a stack of business cards. Then we're going to have some classes, and we're going to have food, and we're going to have some CE credit class. So we're working on that right now. We'll release more information on that. The main thing I'm doing is just telling you, put a red line around October 12th, and don't plan on doing anything else that day except coming to the Benchmark Expo. It will be worth your time. The other thing I want to remind you of is the Elevate Conference coming up. The United Elevate Conference comes up in Orlando in about 2 weeks. This is a big deal, y'all. We've got Lee Brown. She's, if you don't know Lee, she's written several books. She is a very well-known educator, trainer, coach in this industry. The whole conference only costs $4.99. 1 hour with Lee Brown is $4.50. So you're going to get her plus a lot more for about what you would get 1 hour of her time. So it's definitely worth the investment. We also have Craig Grant coming. He's going to talk extensively about Chat GPT and AI, which are all the buzzwords right now. And that is the future of our industry, by the way. So you better be paying attention to that, even if you don't like it. And then we have some motivational stuff here from Allison Levine. She was head of the Mount Everest women's climbing team. So she knows how to get stuff organized and get stuff done and accomplish missions and goals. We have a fair amount of folks going right now. We're up to 52. So we want to say thank you to all those people. Excuse me, got a frog in my throat. We want to say thank you to all those people. You can see there that Mount Juliet's killing it. Cool Springs 112 is catching up to them pretty fast. So y'all better put the pedal to the metal, as they say. Now, for all those who do attend, I'm going to have a little private reception as a thank you for putting your trust in us and coming to the event. This is the events that day on the Monday, September 11th. They end at 5:45. So we're going to have a little at Rosa Mexicana. We're going to have a Benchmark reception that's coming out of my pocket. That's not coming from Benchmark. That's not coming from United. That's coming from Phillip, saying thank you for coming to this event. I'll buy you dinner, buy you a cocktail, buy you a glass of water, whatever fits your boat. We'll do it that day. Also want to remind folks of the TAP program, the Talent Attraction Program. For you existing agents, we're going to pay you $1,000 for every affiliate you bring on board that is qualified. There are qualifications. You want to check that out on our website, but we'll pay you $500 when they join, and then $500 after they've been here for 90 days. The new affiliate will get a $500 brand conversion packet on the Bullseye Marketing Hub. So that will pay for their signs and their business cards and that sort of thing. That's a pretty sweet deal, y'all. $1,000. I don't know where you're going to get that deal anywhere else, but it's worth it for sure. And we have that information on our website. You can go check it out. You want to go check out Benchmark, discoverbenchmark.com, which is our recruiting website. And if you have any question relating to how to get a new affiliate into Benchmark, contact Bo Zivac or your principal broker. They can advise you, they can guide you, they can point you in the direction, they can help reel them in as well. One thing I do want to point out is that we have the TAP program ends September 29th. So you want to make sure that you get your folks in the door then. Now, if you're not with Benchmark and you happen to be a small company owner that's considering shuttering your doors and doing something different, no shame, no harm, no foul. You come on board, you give me a call, give Bo a call. We will meet with you. We'll get you the $1,000 for each one you bring over if we do it appropriately. For those that qualify, there are qualifications that are important. So your principal broker will know, Bo Zivac will know, I will know. Give us a buzz. We're happy to help do that. One of the things that we introduced a few weeks ago was a smart dollar, and it's been pretty successful. Smart dollar is a get out of debt, manage your finances, manage your budget, how to build long-term financial wealth. It is a Ramsey product that we introduced in a small test kitchen. Pearson Smith and Charles Rittenberg were kind of the test environment to see how this thing would go. And the reason that we did it was because of the headline news that you guys have read all over the place about total household debt hitting over $17 trillion a year, and credit card debt alone at $1 trillion. It is absolutely killing America today. It's actually increasing at a rate of $3 trillion in just 3 years. it's absolutely ridiculous. It kills your future. It kills your spending power. It's hard to raise your kids. You have to have more debt to even survive. And we got to put a stop to this. The only way we can do that is through programs such as Smart Dollar. We introduced it 84 days ago, and I'm proud to say we have 380 users. As of today, we've had a total financial turnaround of $202,766 in just 84 days. If you annualize that, that means that those 380 users on the program will experience a $1 million financial turnaround in the course of 12 months, if you annualize that. It's a huge tool. If you're a benchmarkian, if you're with Pearson Smith, if you're with Charles Rittenberg, get on this program right now. For all you United folks, we're going to introduce this to the leadership at Elevate. So you want to be sure you attend that session on Sunday afternoon, because I'll be introducing it to the leadership and talking about how we're going to roll it out on a national scale. That's a big deal. There's not another single real estate company in America doing this for its affiliates except for United Real Estate. It works. Here's the proof. Look at this snapshot survey. The gray bars were the survey taken at the beginning. The purple bars are the survey taken recently, as in yesterday. As you can see, those that felt overwhelming stress, that number has dropped from 28% down to 11%. Occasional stress, that number has gone up because of knowledge. If you know where your money is going, if you know what your money is doing, you are not nearly as concerned about it as you were before. And then no stress at all has gone through the roof. So we are really experiencing some progress here. I want to encourage you again to get on it. One of the questions I have is, well, who's got my data? Who's got my information? We can see your name. We can see your email. We can see your progress in the system according to points in steps in the system. We cannot see your bank account. We cannot see your social security number. We cannot see any of your confidential information. It is 100% confidential. So I want to assure you of that. Now, if you're ready for the next step, we're ready to start talking about the next step. We have have made an arrangement with Creative Planning out of Overland Park, Kansas, to actually take you from the end of Smart Dollar and on into eventual wealth building, true wealth building. We have that program set up and established. And if you are qualified, if you have at least $50,000 that you're ready to invest and you want to just talk to them, drop me an email. You see my email there on the screen, and we will connect you with them. Just to be clear, United Real Estate is paying for all this. United Real Estate makes nothing on this. It is for our affiliates to help you because of the crisis that we are in financially in America today. Real estate agents are some of the most highly paid individuals in America. They also, in many cases, live paycheck to paycheck because we see the commission advance forms that come through here. We know what's going on. We're trying to help you with that process. So my encouragement is to lean in a little bit more about creative planning. They are one of the largest financial wealth managers that you probably never heard of. They mostly work with Schwab and TD Ameritrade for referrals, inbound referrals. And now we've set up a referral program from United Real Estate with them. And you don't have to be on Smart Dollar to do creative planning. If you already have some money, go directly to creative planning. Reach out to me directly. If you're not within the test kitchen that we talked about earlier for Smart Dollar and you want to reach out to creative planning, call me with them and we can see how that works. But you can see they offer financial planning, investment management, strategic tax planning, legal advice. If you want to set up an LLC for your business, here you go. Business services, retirement planning. They'll analyze your insurance and see how you are. You can get all the way over to retirement. If you want to set up a foundation, these are your people that help you do that. And then also, if you choose to get into international real estate, there you go. We got an option for you. $210 billion assets under management. This is a serious company. 450 plus CFP professionals, 105 CPAs on staff, 70 attorneys on staff. These guys know what they're doing. They run at the top ranked firms by Barron's. And we can put you in touch with them, but you must go through me. Okay. So give me, and to be clear, this service is a fee service paid to Creative Planning, not to United Real Estate, but we do not make anything on it. So want to stress that to you. Okay, moving on. Some company numbers, and if you're a non-benchmarkian, this part you can kind of clue out as well too. Just for a minute here, we're going to go through this real brief. What I typically do is talk about year over year, month over this month, like this year versus this month last year. So we'll look at those numbers here. And in 2022, benchmark closed $405 million in gross sales. We paid $10 million in commissions on 891 transactions, and average sales price for us was $455,000. At the same time, the market closed 4,316 transactions. Now compare that was in July of 2022. Compare that to July of 2023. No surprise, we're down. Everybody in America is down. It's okay. It's what it is. Gross sales were down 14.5. Our gross commissions were down 16.3. Our transaction count was 18.5. Our average sales price, though, went up 4.4%. So that's a positive there, I suppose. The main thing that I like to focus on and point out repeatedly to folks is this comparison right here. How did you do versus the market? And if you're a business owner, that's the comparison you should be making. Not to us, not to the guy down the street, but to the market as a whole in which you exist. In our case, we are tracking just like the local market. And that's benchmark, if you don't know, is only in Middle Tennessee. That's the Nashville and the surrounding 9 counties. And we have offices in most of those counties. We are about to expand, and that's a good thing. And we'll talk more about that later. Inventory at the same time for us, this is benchmark inventory. It's 1,415 units. That is down 1.5% from the end of June. And then July a year ago, it's up quite a bit from the 1,361 units we had in inventory a year ago at the end of July. And our affiliate count is up 2.9%. And we closed July at 1,528. Since then, we've added another 12. So we're cooking right along, making progress, and that's what counts. How does it look on a year-to-date comparison? Year-to-date at the end of July 2022, benchmarking had closed $2.9 billion worth of real estate, paid them $76 million in commissions on that, 6,210 transactions, an average sales price of $475. And then this year we're down $2.3 billion, paid $57 million in commissions, and transaction count year to date of 4947, average sales price of $469. Again, the main comparison we want to look at right here is that how do we do versus the local market? In the local market, we're tracking right along. We're 1% off the local market, so that's pretty good. One thing I will say to other benchmarkians, and if you're a local market leader, be careful of the social media posts that you see, because many of them are not truthful. I hate comparisons of one company versus another company. That's why you really don't see us doing that anymore. But the ones that are putting it out are not quoting the right numbers. What you see on your screen here is the right number. So there you have it. I also like to do numbers. Can you tell? So this is a spreadsheet of benchmark tracking 3 KPIs: the gross sales, the gross commissions, and the transaction count from 2017 through 2023. And I know that just blows your mind to see that many numbers, but I have added July in there. And here's a graph on gross sales. You can see along the bottom here, we have them in color. The blue line is 2023 all the way down to 2017. And you can see the trend. That's the point. That's what we're showing here. And this is tracking pretty much like the local market and even like the national market. You can see the blue line here is now taking a dip, and it's dropped down to the yellow line there, which is 2020. That's your comparison. You just want to see how you are compared to the other years. That's gross sales. This is gross commissions. You can see, again, we're tracking the same way. And then in transaction count, you can see it gets a little bit difficult to see. So I dropped the gray arrow in there, but the blue line is now down, touching 2018. That's something to think about. And I think that is a national condition, not just a benchmark condition. So anyway, that's us. Let's talk about the market. Take a little sip of my tea. By the way, I've got Kimberly Ivory on here. Say hi, Kimberly.
Hey, everybody. You'll see me in the chat posing a few questions while Phillip's talking for you non-benchmarkians. So feel free to interact with me. Make sure that you have selected to answer to everyone, not just the panelists. But hello, I'd love to hear some questions. Reach out.
Yep, and that's in the chat feature. So we have Q&A activated, but we prefer the chat feature. That's how she's going to be communicating with you. That allows me to stay focused on you guys instead of trying to do multiple things at once, which I'm not very good at. So anyway, here we are. Market update. We're going to talk about some national stuff here. So now we kind of finished the housekeeping. Now we move into the stuff for everybody. July existing home sales, again, down 2.2%, 4.07 million annualized run rate. That's down 2.2 month over month, down 16.6 year over year. If you recall, our local market stats down 18%. So in the local market here, we're down a hair more than the national market. This is a graph showing that. It goes back 3 years that you can see there. I've drawn a line there just so you can kind of see how low we are compared to the other years in the past 3 years. Moving that to a little bit broader view, taking a step back, you can see a 10-year existing home sales graph on your screen now. And again, I drop in a red line to see that we are as low as we have ever been, just about. On a 25-year basis, again, taking another step back, you can see the same thing. You like to hear in the news that existing home sales are lowest in 14 years. Well, they're not. They're the lowest since 2011. That's actually 12 years. So, okay, minor rounding error, but you can see it right here that 2011, they really dipped down. That's when we were recovering from the last recession. Most of you on this call weren't here then. You weren't in the real estate world back then, but you can see where we're running now. We're back down to separating the adults from the kids. So that's kind of our recurring theme here at Benchmark anyway. The quandary is that prices are still not declining. And you probably read a lot of articles about this and trying to figure out why, and maybe I can offer some stuff. You can see here that the median home price is only slightly off the historic peak of June of 22. That's like the second month. It's been right there almost flat. So you can look at, this is another chart going all the way back to 2012. You can see again that it's only slightly off the peak of 2022. Why? Inventory. One word answer, right? Inventory is sucking wind. We don't have any. It's the highest it's been all year. That's the buzzword you keep reading in the newspaper, which is awesome. That it's the highest it's been all year. But here it is right here, 2023. You can see that it's still way below 2022. So we are lacking inventory, existing inventory and new inventory, same thing. It's just not tracking the seasonality that we had in the last few years of where it bumps up in July and August. We're seeing a drop off earlier this year and they're actually at historic low levels. Even with the biggest one-year sales crash ever, non-reported inventory levels are still near all-time lows. If you don't have it, you can't sell it. If you look at the chart on your screen right there, you see the little gray line going across. I put a red line on there to make it easier to see. The historic mean average of inventory in America is 2.275 million units. Right now, we're running at 1.11 million units as a mean. So we have less than half of the inventory that we typically have at this time of year. And that's the historic mean. So that means all year, we're still running at half the inventory we typically have. Why do we not have inventory? Well, there you go. High mortgage rates. People are not selling. It's hovered recently in the last week or so between 7.35 and 7.46. And you can see this chart from this morning at 7.37. This is Mortgage News Daily, which if you don't watch them, you ought to watch them every day. They post the update average at 4:30 Eastern time each day. So you can see 4:30 Eastern time what that looks like. In fact, this is when I pulled this, was it yesterday at 4:30, 5 o'clock. You can see that the 30-year average is 7.37. This is probably the truest average of all the ones that I have found. So if you want to check a reasonable source, Mortgage News Daily. Another reason, again, mortgage rates. This is a graph you're looking at, and I've shown this before, so it shouldn't be news to most of you, but the graph you see on the chart is mortgages by percentage rate. Across all mortgages, and this is by Black Knight back in March of 31. It has not changed noticeably since then. But this is percentage of mortgages at certain percentage interest rates. Excuse me, number of mortgage at certain percentage interest rates. And you can see the problem. 91.8% of all mortgages in existence today are sub 6%. 82.4% are sub 5%. It gets better. 62% are sub 4%. And finally, 23.5% are sub 3% mortgages. That's almost a quarter of all mortgages. Those folks are not going to move unless they have to. They're not going to move on a whim. They're not going to move because it's fun. They're not going to move because they think they'd like to have a different house. They're going to move only because they have to. And that's your inventory crunch in a bubble right there. 30-year fixed rate mortgages are now the highest in 22 years. And there's the graph to prove it on your chart. So you just need to pay attention to that, need to be aware of that. Now, we see a lot of questions about my house is not selling listings. My listing's not selling. Help me look at this listing. And people think it's staging, it's trees, it's location. All those things are important. But what you need to understand is the purchasing power that the buyer pool has lost. So not only do we not have inventory, we have a purchasing pool. This is the function of high interest rates. We have a pool of buyers who've lost purchasing power. So a home buyer with a $3,000 budget has lost $70,000 in purchasing power in 1 year. Let me say that again. In 1 year, the ability to buy a home has dropped by $70,000. That's a pretty big drop. By the way, this little graph you see on the screen is courtesy of Redfin. Redfin has a lot of data out there. I don't know how they are as a real estate company, but they have some great economists and data people. So I highly recommend you follow them and pay attention to them. This was actually posted yesterday. It was posted several months ago, and I used it internally, and it was posted yesterday, so I want to use it again. You can see right here a $3,000 payment at 5.5% interest. That person could afford a $500,000 house, a $500,000 house. But when the interest goes to 7.35, which is slightly less than where it is today, that purchase can only max out at $430,500. This is an interactive chart. It's a sliding chart. You can use this with your clients. You can use this with your team. It's a great resource tool to show them the effect of high mortgage rates. You know, you can say high mortgage rate, high mortgage rate, high mortgage rate doesn't really make much anything but noise to you until you actually see a chart like this and you can play with it and say, oh my gosh, my buyers are dying out here in the wilderness. And of course, if you are representing buyers, you understand that as well. Purchase mortgage application index, which is kind of an indication of the future, is the lowest in 28 years. There it is right there. So we go all the way back to the 90s before we get to the point of mortgage applications that are being submitted on a monthly basis in July. Really hard data to look at, I know. We do have positive here that now that things have kind of shifted around a little bit, we still have a huge relocation segment moving. 26% of all home buyers now are looking to relocate. That's a record high. It's never been that high. So if you're paying attention to your out-of-town buyers, your social media presence, your online presence, this is where you're going to get your relocation buyers. They're going to find you. If they can't find you, they're not going to do business with you. But there are a flood of people coming. If you're fortunate as we are and blessed as we are to be in Middle Tennessee, is one of the hot destinations for people that are moving. This is a very good blessing for sure. Other positive factors, this is from the recent Zillow buyer housing trends. Almost all buyers still use an agent. You can see that it popped up nicely in 2022. And then it kind of held constant there in 2023. So using an agent by a home buyer is still the most popular way to find a house. Also from that same report, we have the regional report. You can see here that 41% of buyers were in the South, headed to the South, buying in the South. And then the household income was $100,000 or more, 42%. You can see those numbers there. This is all on the Zillow website. You can go get it, put it in your listing presentations, put it in your buyer rep presentations. I don't care. I'm just trying to help you. I would say to those that are here in Middle Tennessee and in the wealthier areas of the South, you need to be on your knees thanking God you happen to live in this area, because this is where they're coming to. This is where the business is. I know it may seem hard, may seem depressing, may seem difficult at times, but you could not be in a better place. You also ought to be thanking God you don't live in California and you don't live in the Northeast. No politics intended, but those areas are bleeding. They are bleeding. They are dying on the vine. Here's the proof. This is the Nashville housing market snapshot from the Zillow Economic Research, which again, this is available to anybody who wants to get it. You can see that the home value index is still hanging in there. The median list price is actually up 6%. That's the number in the middle. That's what median means, the number in the middle. And the median sales price is down a little bit, slightly, but it's up month over month. And the percentage of homes sold above list price is still at 26.1%. That's kind of phenomenal to me. That's down from this time last year, but it's up month over month. It still tells me that we have a very stable market here in Middle Tennessee, and that's a blessing for sure. Moving on to predictions. Everybody has a crystal ball, right? Every media outlet has a prognostication about what's going to happen. What you see on the screen is an average of the Mortgage Bankers Association, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and NAR on where the future holds. In 2023, everybody's amalgamated average is 4.3 million units. 2024 rising to 4.7, and then NAR is the only one that has chanced a guess on 2025. They're saying 5.1 million units. I think, to be honest with you, we're not going to see that. It really depends on what the Fed does and depends on what mortgage interest rates do completely. This recent rise in mortgage interest rates that we just talked about, that I've said it's gone from like 7.15 to 7.36 to 7.46 in the last 2 weeks, is pricing in the Federal Reserve's moves on the overnight interest rates. They're trying to second guess. My prediction, we're going to have 2 more increases this year, quarter point increases this year. That's going to push us up close to 8%. That's not fantasy. That's not wishful thinking. That is simply doing the math. You know what the Fed funds rate is, you know what the 10-year bond is, you can calculate what the 30-year mortgage is going to be. It's really, they're so closely related, you can just track them, and it's a math issue. 6 million units like we had a couple of years ago, we're not going to see those for another 5 to 7 years. There you go. You have my crystal ball. May not be happy hunky-dory, but hey, we got a puppy.
Okay, we got lots of giggles from that. Thank you for doing it.
Well, you know, I'm kind of Mr. Negative Ned, and I got to throw something in there that's good, right? So that's my grand dog, by the way. He's full grown now, miniature golden doodle, Leo. We love Leo at my house for sure. So that was him when he was a pup. So a little light in the mood there. Now, let's get into the meat of the matter. We have this ominous warning here, changes coming, and we talked about this ad nauseum last month. That recording is out there on our Benchmark YouTube channel. You can go watch it, please do. I actually started talking about the impending class action lawsuits as early as February of 2020. Everybody kind of laughed and scoffed and ridiculed and criticized, and now, well, here we are. The first one of those, as you'll recall, is coming to trial this October, and we'll see how all that goes. But the main point is it is shifting the ground under your feet, and I need to help you, or I feel a mission on helping as many people as possible to understand what that means and how to navigate that and how to get through that in a successful manner. I'm confident that real estate sales will continue, so let's put that one off the table right now. I am confident that the agent status of buyer agency status will continue at a certain level, but how that looks is going to be different. And that's the point that we're focusing in on. It's now more important than ever. The buyer agency is, and as I just said, this is why, because of the class action lawsuits are coming down the road. The first one, which is, what is that? Sitzer Burnett is coming up in October. Those plaintiffs have actually asked for a injunction. These are federal lawsuits, y'all. They have asked for a federal injunction against guaranteed shared cooperation. Think about that for a minute. You want to go back and watch my video from last month and understand fully what that means. They can appeal these lawsuits all they want to. They can appeal them, and undoubtedly they will go to the Supreme Court. At least one of them will. Undoubtedly they will result in some changes. The question is what, when, how much, and what do we do about it? That's what I'm trying to do here. Okay, so moving over that, after the last presentation, we got some comments, we got some questions, you know, and this is kind of an amalgamation of different questions that we got. These are not questions that came in or comments that came in from any specific group or individual. It's kind of a homogenization, if you will, of the questions that we received, that I received. And I'll just read them to you. I have a listing that I've shown to an unrepresented buyer 2 times. They want to make an offer, and I just want to be clear that I do this correctly. How do I, or can I, receive the whole commission? So we're going to peel that off and address that in this presentation. And then the other one kind of summarizes the most of the questions that we received, and it was from the buyer side. So that, you know, if the seller does not provide a buyer's agent comp, will the buyer rep agreement then become insignificant or irrelevant? I just don't see buyers paying that comp to their agent. Looks to me that buyers will go directly to the listing agent. And we're going to take that conversation or that topic and peel that off and deal with that individually. And I'm going to show you how to do that. There's 2 critical points to remember in the future change. These things are going to happen. Buyer agents must be willing and able to articulate your value to the buyer so that they get paid, even if the seller agent does not offer shared compensation. It is a critical skill set you must be developing right now. It's a critical conversation. It's a hard conversation, but it is critical that you develop that skill. Seller agents, these are listing agents, will see more buyers showing up unrepresented and must be knowledgeable and prepared to deal with that fact. And those 2 elements right there, if you could boil everything down to the impact of the lawsuits and the impact of the world that we live in today, these are the 2 outcomes that you're going to see. So I thought the best way to deal with that is just kind of back up and let's talk about the law for a second. Okay, so 62.13.401 is creation of agency relationship. You can go read the law. That's Tennessee Code annotated. So that is state law in Tennessee. And every state in the union has a law just like it. So you need to go refresh yourself on whatever your law is in that area. But you need to understand it. In the beginning, there are 4 types of agency in Tennessee. All right, many agents don't really even realize there are 4 types. So let's walk through this. Just a little Mickey Mouse for a second, and then we're going to get to the meat and potatoes. There's buyer agency, seller agency, designated agency, and dual agency. As a matter of information, it is still legal in Tennessee for dual agency. There are 9 states where dual agency is now illegal. If you live in one of those, God bless you. I wish we had it illegal in Tennessee because we have outlawed it here at Benchmark. We absolutely do not allow dual agency under the Benchmark flag. No way, no how, never going to do it. End of conversation. So that's why if you look, you have the 4 types of agencies. You look on the confirmation of agency status form. This is a Tennessee Association of Realtors form that you see on the screen, a portion of it. And you have in the middle part here, the 4 types of agencies that are recognized. You have with your transaction broker facilitator, which is, by the way, we'll talk in a second, your native state. That means you represent no one, okay? To be clear, you represent no one if you declare yourself to be a facilitator. You are simply a transaction broker. Then there is seller's unrepresented or the buyer's unrepresented, designated agent for the seller, or disclosed dual agent, okay? We'll talk about each of those here in just a second, but I wanted to point that out. Also point out on this form that it says right down here, I've just highlighted it, this notice of itself does not constitute an agency agreement or establish any agency relationships. Critical point. We'll kind of talk about that in a minute too. Speaking of critical points, there are about 7 or 8 or 9 here that I'm going to throw at you that are key to understand. An agency relationship in Tennessee is not implied or created by a licensee's actions, behavior, or even verbal statements. Do not create agency. It cannot be created accidentally. It can only be created by execution of a bilateral, that means signed by 2 people, you and the client, written agreement. That is the only way they can be called your client. Be clear on that first one. Second one, a licensee is always a facilitator by default. As I said earlier, that is your natural state. That's the state in which you exist until you execute the bilateral written agreement. You remain a facilitator until that is written and has been negotiated with the consumer and then signed by both parties. A licensee's delivery of a written disclosure or confirmation of agency status, is what we call it here in Tennessee, saying that he or she is an agent does not make the agent, the licensee, an agent. Okay, signing a disclosure does not mean you created agency status. A unilateral disclosure is not a bilateral agreement. You have not signed that form as an agreement in agency specifying what your duties are. And number 4, seller agency or buyer agency, non-designated. Okay, this is when you check the box that says agent for the seller or agent for the buyer, obligates everyone in that office to a relationship with that buyer or the seller. So no one in that office can bring a buyer on that listing, or can bring can bring a buyer on that listing without practicing dual agency, because you declared, when you said seller, agent for the seller, agent for the buyer, you declared that the entire company represents that seller. Okay. That's why we use designated agency here in Tennessee in Benchmark. We always, do I need to say it again? Always use designated agency that establishes an agency relationship between only one real estate licensee in that office, to the exclusion of all the others, including the managing broker and a buyer or seller. Okay, that's important. Key differentiation. Always designated agency. Moving on with critical points, every change, when you change that, it's got to be documented. It's got to be fully disclosed at the time the change. TAR has furnished us with a form for that, a separate form for that. You don't just execute a new agreement, you execute the proper form. Should be changed or documented, even if the consumer has given prior consent. If you read the listing agreement, it gives you prior consent. But the law says if you do change, you must document that change. You can't just do it automatically. An agency relationship is not required for a licensee to receive a commission. You can receive a commission as a facilitator. Okay. Usually as a buyer's agent, you come in, I'm going to be the facilitator for this buyer. And that's just kind of a side note. You know, on our MLS, we have 3 places for compensation, which all of this centers around compensation, right? Everybody's always worried, how do I get paid? How do I get paid? How do I get paid? We're going to talk about that. But 3 slots, you have buyer and facilitator, and then you have buyer agent. So the facilitator section, a lot of people put like 5 or 6% in there. Somebody's going to show up as a facilitator and say, I'm facilitator for this buyer, pay me the whole 6%, because that's what you advertise in the MLS. They'll take that to the code of ethics. They'll take that to the grievance committee and they'll win professional standards. Dual agency is still legal in Tennessee if it is fully disclosed to both parties and both parties give full consent, written consent. Disclosed dual agency, however, is against benchmark written policy. Most legal experts, pretty much everyone that you talk to, will say that it greatly increases the legal liability for both the licensee and the firm, as well as exponentially increasing the potential for complaints to the real estate commission. So stay away from dual agency. You can create dual agency accidentally by not understanding agency. We see it happen quite often in our compliance process. We kick it back to the agent and say, you just created inadvertent, accidental dual agency, go fix this. And they do, to their credit. There's some myths out there that keep floating around that kind of highlight the information that I just said. So I want to kind of run right at them and talk about it. The first myth you see on the screen there is an agency relationship can be implied, created accidentally, or created simply by the licensee's actions, statements, or behavior. Putting someone in your car and riding them around, claiming them that they are your client, does not create agency. Myth number two, you can be a seller's agent as a listing agent and a facilitator for the buyer at the same time. You can sell your own listing without changing your agency status in the transaction to facilitator. Three myths. Let's look at each one of those. The first one, it's false. Agency law in Tennessee states that agency relationship does not exist without a bilateral written agency agreement. That is state law between the licensee and the buyer or the seller. An agency disclosure form or confirmation of agency form is not a bilateral agreement. It's a disclosure. Burn that in your head. Second one, it's false. A licensee cannot be working as a seller's agent under a listing agreement and simultaneously represent himself or herself as a facilitator to an unrepresented buyer who might like to purchase the property. This is a deceptive practice. You will get sued for this one day if you continue to do it. It is misrepresentation. That's what the law says. By the way, the documentation that I am sourcing here is available to anybody. Of course, it's state law, it's codified, but also the Real Estate Commission years ago published this handy little guide called A Guide to Tennessee's Agency Law. It was written in 2009 by a man named Pug Scoville. And if you've been in this industry for a while, you should know that name. Pug is now retired. I think he's still alive, but if he is, he's probably still living on the beach in Florida somewhere. Wonderful individual, extremely intelligent, helped write agency law in Tennessee back in the 90s, worked for the Tennessee Association of Realtors at the time. And this was the guide that he put out. And these myths that I have on the screen are directly from that guide. So if you want to reference that, feel free to. The last myth here, you can't sell your own listing without changing your agency status to a transaction facilitator. That is false as well. A seller's agent can assist and even advise prospective buyer in almost every way throughout a transaction to help that buyer purchase the agent's listing, as long as the seller's agent remains loyal to the seller and does not compromise or ever work against his or her client's best interests. It's best in our world to refer that unrepresented buyer to another agent in your office, just to keep things clean. If you're using designated agency, you can do that with no problem at all. Just call your broker and say, I have an unrepresented buyer, I'm not comfortable, blah. But as a listing agent, it is completely permissible. Hear me clearly now. It is completely permissible to help that unrepresented buyer create the offer on the property. But you have to be very careful that you don't breach your confidentiality and that you don't breach your loyalty to your seller client. Okay. So those are three myths. There are more in the booklet that I referenced a minute ago, but those are three fundamental myths that we see a lot of misunderstanding on. So hopefully that makes sense to you. If no agency agreement is signed, you are a facilitator, period. You're not something else. Facilitator is everyone's native state. In the absence of a written bilateral agency agreement between the licensee and a consumer, facilitator or transaction broker is the status for any agent acting as neither agent for the buyer nor agent for the seller. Simply put, a facilitator is a non-agent. Okay, that's important. It's important to understand. I'll tell you why in a minute. Facilitator status does not obligate or bind the licensee to represent either party. A licensee's statement that he or she is a facilitator means that the licensee has no agency relationship with either party in the transaction. One cannot be an agent for the seller and simultaneously telling the buyer that he or she is a facilitator. That is illegal. You cannot do that. That is a misrepresentation, and it will get you in trouble. So please hear that clearly. We don't do dual agency here in Benchmark, and I hope you don't do dual agency either, because it conflicts with the duties owed. So on the left, you see the duties owed to all parties. On the right, you see the duties that are specific to a client. And the conflict is right here in confidentiality and loyalty. If you're a dual agent, how can you if you have confidential information on both parties, do you not put yourself in a huge liability situation by maintaining that confidentiality? And it's a short trip to say you weren't loyal to me. Okay. So that's the problem. How do you prove that you maintain confidentiality for and that you're loyal to two opposing forces? So our policy is we do not allow it ever. So just keep that in mind, that we X out dual agency. I'm going to use a big red X every chance I get where the word dual agency is involved. So just always use designated agency. We talked about this a minute ago. Remember, there are the 4 types of agency: seller agency, buyer agency, designated agency, and dual agency. Those are the 4 types. We do not permit dual at Benchmark. Do I need to say that one more time? Seller agency and buyer agency creates a client relationship to one client by every agent in that firm. Okay. Meaning another agent within the same firm cannot represent another client on the same property without backing into or inadvertently creating a dual agency situation. And as I've said, that's a fast path to a lawsuit because it's hard to prove you maintain loyalty and confidentiality to 2 opposing forces. The danger is by selecting seller agency, another agent within the firm cannot bring a buyer on that property without creating dual agency. The same thing is true with buyer agency. Another agent within the firm cannot bring a buyer on any of our listings without creating dual agency. That's not a space you want to be in. So that's why we always use designated agency. This is the 4th time I've hit this in the presentation. Do you understand now what we're saying? I hope so. I'm not trying to be a smart aleck, but this is really important stuff. And it's stuff that many agents clearly don't have a good grasp of. So your bilateral agency agreement, you have 2 of them. You have a buyer agency agreement, you have a listing agreement. Depending on which side you're on, that's the one you sign. They're all very clear. But one of the questions that came up as a listing agent or from a listing agent is unrepresented buyer. How do I get the whole commission? You get paid as a listing agent. It's already governed by the listing agreement. And I think most state agreements work the same way. Ours in Tennessee does, in Section 6 and Section 7 talks about your compensation. Section 6, this is the section you just stick a number in that blank, but you never read. It says, you, the seller, agree to pay me X amount when I bring a ready, willing, and able buyer. If I sell it, or if I bring a ready buyer, a ready, willing, and able tenant. There it is, right there. You can read it. Total compensation. Line 56. Second word, total compensation. Nowhere in here does it say how much you have to share, right? Section 7 says how much you share. Okay. If there's nobody showing up, no agent showing up with a buyer, you don't share anything because your total compensation says what you're going to get paid. This is between the broker and the broker. This is not between the client and the buyer. Okay. So if you've got X% in Section 6 and you've got X% in Section 7 and no other agent shows up, Section 7 does not apply. And that's what Section 7 says. There's also another element down here below, which I have highlighted again, that talks about how much you agree to share if the agent showing up is a non-MLS member. That's your choice. My note that I say to agents here is you spend an awful lot of money as part of the MLS. You spend an awful lot of money having access to that. Do you want to pay the same amount to somebody who didn't spend that money versus somebody who doesn't spend the money? That's between you and your client. Y'all decide that. Okay. Key points to remember as a listing agent. If you don't hear anything else, hear this. If a buyer comes unrepresented, you can still write the contract and assist and advise that prospective buyer in almost every way throughout a transaction to help that buyer purchase your listing. So long as, and this is the part you have to be careful with, you can prove that you remain loyal and did not compromise or ever work against your client, your listing, your selling client's best interests. So that's something to be careful of. If a buyer comes unrepresented, your status does not need to change to facilitator. We have a little box on the form that says buyer is unrepresented. That's the box you use. You don't tag the box and say you're a facilitator. You do that, You put on another hat on top of your agency hat for the seller. You put on a facilitator agency hat. You can't do that. Even if your seller is comfortable allowing you to switch to facilitator, which we highly do not recommend, that you go from listing agent to facilitator or designated agent for the seller to facilitator. We recommend you do not do that. But even if they agree to it, you should never execute a buyer's rep agreement with an unrepresented buyer, because then you've switched sides. You've completely switched sides. You said you're a facilitator, and now you're got a buyer's agreement with the buyer, and you're still a facilitator for the seller. What the heck, right? What the heck? You cannot wear two agency hats simultaneously. Your total compensation is established in the listing agreement under Section 6. In whatever state listing agreement you're using, I'm sure you've got the same thing in yours. And regardless of a buyer having representation or no representation, total compensation does not change. Okay? Now that's the listing agent side. Let's shift over to the buyer agent side and the future in buyer agency. Okay? As a buyer agency, you must be able to explain how you get paid. You must be able to talk about your value proposition. Summarizing quotes and questions that came in. Again, I say it, if the seller does not provide a buyer agent comp, will the buyer rep agreement then be insignificant? The immediate answer is no. I just don't see buyers paying that comp. Their agent looks to me like buyers will go directly to their listing agent. My response, you get what you allow. If you refuse to express your value, if you refuse to develop the skill set to have that compensation conversation, you're allowing yourself to not get paid, plain and simple, okay? So it's essential then that you develop your buyer presentation so that it articulates your value and what you're going to bring to the table for the money you're going to ask for it. By the way, we kind of back up all the way and we'll talk about it more. Well, okay, pause. Let's move forward. I was going to say something and I'm going to realize that I'm going to say it again in just a minute. I don't want to repeat myself, even though I do that. Develop your buyer presentation. We have one already on the Benchmark Dash for you. Benchmark Dash, Agent Resources, Marketing Center, buyer presentation. By the way, we also have a listing presentation on there that you can download, customize. It's beautiful. I'll show you a picture of it in a minute. Use it. Stop winging it. You also need to confront your biggest fear at the beginning of the relationship. This is the buyer rep agreement, Section 3, paragraph E, where you talk about getting paid. And it says specifically, if seller does not offer compensation, you will pay me X amount. This is my expectation for my services rendered. That's a conversation, and I see these every day come through here with zero in there because you are betting on the guaranteed shared cooperation continuing. And I can tell you, as the sun came up this morning, it is not going to continue after these lawsuits. And you better get ready for it. You have got to do two things right now. You've got to read and execute the buyer rep agreement at the beginning of the relationship, and you've got to hone your skills and be able to explain your value proposition. You have to, or you will not be in business. You just have to. That's a slide from the last presentation. If you want to know more of details on why I make those statements, go watch that last presentation on our YouTube channel. But we're here to help. We have a buyer presentation already. It's graphically appealing. You can drop in information, even plan on how to, we even show you how to adjust it in Canva. There's all sorts of opportunities here to be able to communicate your value proposition to your buyer client. And you need to start utilizing those right now, today, so that you can get ahead of the curve on this thing. And why is it important now? Yeah, we have the federal lawsuits. I've said that 2 or 3 times now, the federal lawsuits, federal lawsuits, federal lawsuits. We also have the outliers, the wild cards. DOJ and the FTC are coming right behind the lawsuits. As soon as those settle out, I'm confident the DOJ is just sitting here waiting for the lawsuits to do their job for them. And the FTC has already received an executive order in July of 2021 that said you will investigate the residential real estate commission industry because we believe as a precedent that it's driving up home prices in America. So they already have their sanction. They already have their hunting license, and they're just sitting there waiting for the lawsuits to settle out. The range of potential outcomes, again, this is from the last one. So let me be clear. I'm confident the defendants will settle. I'm also confident that we're going to have a lot of changes and it's going to be very expensive for the defendants. And keep in mind, listing agents can always suggest to their clients, to their sellers, that something be included for buyer's agent. There is no law in America that can be passed that can change that. So our hope is that that will continue. And if you're a listing agent, my encouragement is that that would continue. Okay, the last thing a listing agent wants the first-time home buyer showing up unrepresented. I promise you, you don't want that nightmare. So keep that in mind. But here's the range of potential outcomes. You're right there on the left, the status quo. Guaranteed shared compensation for buyer's agent remains in place. Buyer's agents can negotiate additional compensation as part of a contract. Okay. What is most likely is this portion in the middle. What is not going to happen is the status quo remaining where it is. Okay. Most likely predictions. And this is not just me. This is every expert I can consult on the process and every attorney I can talk to. And if you are a business owner, a broker, I highly recommend you talk to an attorney right now so that you're doing the right things. I have, for sure. But I think this is what's going to happen. Seller offering buyer's agent compensation becomes optional. Guaranteed shared compensation goes away. Buyer's agents can negotiate compensation through seller's agents and or compensation from their buyer client. Clear cooperation goes away. I'm predicting that as well. And every expert I talk to is predicting that too. MLS has become a data platform for consumers and agents. Did you hear what I just said? For consumers and agents. That means a separation of NAR and control of the MLSs. I believe that's going to happen because I don't think they're going to have a choice. It's either that or it's going to be a whole lot worse for them if they try to resist that. But again, it's going to take years to find out. That first case that goes to trial in October, as I said earlier, the plaintiffs are asking for a federal injunction against shared cooperation, guaranteed shared cooperation. The federal injunction survives appeals. So it could be, and this is outside chance, but you need to be aware of it. It could be that in October, when that trial ends, that first trial ends, no matter whether it's being appealed or not, guaranteed shared cooperation could end at that moment. That's an eye-opener. It should be. So this is why it's so essential for you to be paying attention to how you represent yourself as a buyer's agent and the words you say, and then even as a listing agent, how you understand agency and how it works and how you're going to get paid and how you're going to pay everybody else or not. That's up to you and your client. We are already seeing $1 shared compensations in the MLS. 2 MLSs have already said you can even put 0 in there now. We don't care. So effectively, they've gone from $1 to 0, but effectively they've killed guaranteed shared compensation. If you show the house and you are obligated by the code of ethics to show whatever house your client wants to see, you got to be prepared, or you might work for $1 or for 0 in the end. We've had it happen inside Benchmark. It's heartbreaking. It's heartrending. Pay attention, get ready. Changes are coming. Positive side, I go back to the report that 88% of buyers still used an agent in 2023. And by the way, this is from like January to April was this survey, okay? 88% still use an agent. And I think that trend will continue. What the agent relationship looks like with that client is going to be different. Half of buyers with an agent hired the first one they contacted. And I've said this for years, 47%. I've said this for years. You're either top of mind, a distant second, or you're not playing in the game at all. So the key to success here is also being top of mind in as many potential clients' minds as possible. I can go down a real rabbit hole with a database and keeping in touch and your CRM and the importance of all that. That's a whole separate class and presentation by itself. But everyone you have ever been done business with needs to get a warm touch from you, a real touch, a real feeling touch from you every month, or you're not number one. And if you're not number one, you got a big chance of not being in there. Almost a quarter of buyers say they broke up with their agent, the 26%. And why? Because they felt like the agent was difficult to communicate with and not doing their job. They felt like they were just filling out the paperwork and moving on down the road. Bing, bada boom, bada boom. Let's go. We got to get out of here. Got to get in here. Got to get out of here. Are you a tour bus driver or are you a professional? It's time to put your big adult pants on and become a professional. The world is forcing it. I know that all sounds negative, but hey, we got a puppy.
Phillip, I have some questions. I don't know if you want me to wait till the very end from some of our agents.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me get through the next 3 slides and then we'll do those. How about
Okay.
that? All right. So if you've listened to any of my presentations, you've heard me mention a fellow named Mike Del Prete. He's a professor at University of Boulder, Colorado, who is an analyst of our industry and really knows what he's talking about. He did a recent presentation at Inman Connect. I was not there, but I did see the video. And he uses this analogy, and I thought it was very appropriate. So because of the rising tide in our industry of cheap money and high abundance and high demand, our industry looks a little bit like this yacht club right here. It's crowded with boats. There's a lot of boats in there. Can't even really move. There's so many in there. But now the tide has gone out and our industry is beginning to look like this, and it will increasingly begin more and more look like this. The trick for you, the challenge that I give to you is this: be the guy out there at sea, not the one strangling on the shore. As Warren Buffett said, only when the tide goes out can you discover who's been swimming naked. That's a bad visual, I know, especially with me, old fat guy. But it's a bad visual, but the truth is there's a lot of people in this business that have been swimming naked and the tide was so high you couldn't tell. You absolutely could not tell. And then I ran across a quote today from a friend of mine named James Twiggins that is really interesting, and I thought I would include it here at the last minute. It says, if the industry is going to survive in the future, we cannot be perceived just as people who open doors, write offers, and move on. If that's all the consumer believes we do, then we're going to have a really hard time getting paid for it in the future. Combination of law, combination of consumer attitudes, combination of a lot of things. It's a very good quote, James, and I really appreciate it. If you don't know James, he's got a podcast, Real Estate Insider podcast, you ought to listen to. Pay attention to the benchmark dash. If you're a benchmarkians, we're going to have more and more and more and more training on this, on how to do these things, because this is the key to your success, and you need to bear down and lean in. The days of being a tour bus driver, showing up and getting a big fat check, those days are rapidly coming to a close. So I highly recommend you pay attention. So with that said, clue me on the questions, Kimberly.
Okay, we just have a couple. So Ryan Crawford asked, why would benchmark allow buyer or seller agency?
We don't. That's the point. We don't allow buyer agency. We allow designated buyer agency, designated seller agency. Okay. When we see buyer agency, we'll kick it back to the agent. Now, if that has happened in our compliance process, that was a mistake because we should be stopping those files. But as I said earlier, when you select buyer agency or seller agency, that means that the entire firm represents that one client and no other agent within this firm, not office, but firm, can represent a buyer or a seller on a property, on the same property.
I know Mike's helped and chimed in a little bit, but Casey Bird also says, will we still be able to upload the compensation agreement to our listings? Or have they halted the posting of guaranteed comps in the MLS?
So let me be clear on that, because that's an important point. Thank you for that. As of today, nothing has changed. Okay. So I'll say it again. As of today, nothing has changed. What we've been talking about is proper process and agency rules and laws and how to get representation. There's been no change in the MLS. There's been no change in the law. There's been no change in the rules. So however you've been doing it is fine. My point in putting this presentation together is simply to say, get ready, prepare, think about. I'm trying to get you to think about how you're going to do business when things do change. But again, as I said, nothing has changed to this date.
Okay. Christy Young, why would Clear Corporation go away? Isn't that more about information, the mass market, to benefit the sellers versus pocket listings?
Clear cooperation is the catalyst for all of three of these lawsuits. The fact that you must put it on the MLS. And when you put it on the MLS, theoretically, I'm not saying, to be clear, I'm not saying I agree with any stance of any plaintiff or any defendant. All right. I'm a neutral party here. I'm simply reporting on what the facts are. But the fact that you require a brokerage to put their listings on an MLS within 48 hours, as opposed to representing them to their buyer clients first, is a challenge. And that's where a lot of these lawsuits have come from.
Okay, thank you so much. Right now, that clears the board that we had in the chat. So I guess if anybody has anything, maybe they want to open their mic up, if that's possible.
I don't think opening the mic is possible, but you can drop
okay,
it.
Gail Moore, she said, can you explain the pocket listing versus a regular listing?
Well, pocket listing is not an official title of anything. It's just a term that's been used in our industry to say, I'm going to keep this listing information in my pocket and share it with my specific buyers and no one else. That's kind of ties into the clear cooperation thing, and clear cooperation was supposedly a rule that was passed to get over that, to stop that. Well, it hasn't, because you can have an exclusive listing, you can have exclusion on the listing agreement, and you can share it with just the buyers of your firm. But pocket listing was where you would have one agent who would keep the listing in their pocket and not share it with anybody except for specific buyers, with the main intent of capturing the entire commission and not sharing anything with anybody. If you look at the commercial real estate world, that's kind of how it's done in many cases. And there's no rules against that.
Awesome. Well, we just got, thank you so much for the presentation. They appreciate all the information that you give them.
Well, good. I'm glad it works. Now, if you're a benchmarkian, this video will be posted on the Dash this afternoon, along with the slide deck. So it will help you understand. It'll be PDF of the slide deck. If you want to take those slides and download them and put them in your presentations to your buyers or to your sellers, then you're encouraged to do that. We'll have the video out on the Benchmark YouTube channel in a day or so. So be sure to check that out, and be sure to check out our other videos on the channel as well. And I really appreciate everybody being here today. With that said, I'm going to stop my screen share and say thank you so much for attending. Stay tuned for the next.
See you at some trainings coming up. We've got lots of great stuff coming on. So be checking out the calendar, registering, lots of fun things. Momentum Title has some special events coming up. So make sure you look at those as well. So
very good. Absolutely. What she said. Let's do that. All right.
Bye, guys.
Y'all have a great weekend. Bye-bye.